Hey friends, welcome back to another Seed Talk with Lisa and Layne and a special guest today. Don't say your name, just say hey.
Oh,
Hey,
All right, so for you guys listening, you'll have to wait to see who that is. But if you're watching us over on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, you can see who our special guest is. I want to remind everybody that this podcast is made possible by thegardenersworkshop.com, which is home base to everything that we do and talk about here. Layne is the seed manager. I'm the head bottle washer. And this podcast was born out of questions and requests from you guys. And we just appreciate you dropping in here for a little bit with us. So, Layne, why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about who we're going to talk to and what we're going to talk about today?
all right. Well, back in episode 50, Lisa and I did a little comparison of the Amazon and Sweet series of Sweet William, and everybody really liked that. But I thought, why don't we open it up? Because there are even more varieties than that. And it can be very confusing for people to understand which ones they should plant, what the differences are. And some of them have different planting times than other ones. So I thought, why don't we bring our friend along, Mr. Dave Dowling? Hello, Dave.
hi Layne, how you doing? Hi Lisa.
Hey,
Welcome
Dave.
back.
Happy to be back.
Yeah. Dave, can you just introduce yourself to anyone that hasn't heard your previous episodes on here, which I'm sure they all have?
Yeah, my name's Dave Dowling. I actually work now for Ball Seed or Ball Color Link as a sales rep advisor to cut flower growers all across the US. I do the online class for the Gardener's Workshop, which is bulbs, perennials, woodies, and more. I had a cut flower farm in Maryland for 20 years and been in the business now for 30 some years. It's hard to believe that long, but 30 some years in the cut flower business.
Good way to look at that is we've had a lot of time to make all the mistakes, right, Dave?
Yes.
And to figure out the right way, the easiest, the shortcuts. That's the way I think
Yep.
of it
I've
sometimes.
made some mistakes, all in the past, I hope.
All right, so we're going to get started, and we're going to start with two plants that are actually biennials. So, Dave, before we talk about these two biennial varieties, can you just talk about what a biennial is and why they might have different planting times than some of the other varieties we're going to talk about later today?
Yeah, a biennial is a flower that will be planted this year and won't bloom until next year. It basically needs to have a cold period, a vernalization period, and it will bloom next spring. So if you'll plant these Dianthus in early fall of this year, they'll grow a little bit this fall, sit over the winter, and then bloom for you next April, May, or June, depending where you're located.
So do you have a date that you like to reference, Dave, when you say, in general, people should start their biennial Sweet William seeds by this date, or they should get their plants in the ground by this date in relation to their first expected fall frost?
They should get their plants in the ground about 4 to 5 weeks before their first fall frost. And so you want to back up another 4 to 6 weeks before that is when you should be starting the seed if you're starting your own plugs. Or if you're ordering plugs, you want to order them 4 to 6 weeks before you need them shipped to you so the grower has time to grow them.
Lisa, when do you tend to start your biennial Sweet William seeds, and when do you start your first year flowering types that we're going to talk about later?
Sure. So we start pretty early on these two, Super Duplex and Electron, just to make sure that we have them in the ground and established. So that cold period that Dave talks about, that they're ready to take that on. So we actually start these two guys usually about this time of the year, late July, early August. And then they get planted out when they're about 6 weeks old, and that's definitely earlier than our other Sweet Williams that we treat as true hardy annuals. And we plant them about 6 weeks before our first frost, and we start them about 4 weeks before that. So basically 10 weeks before our first frost date, which of course, that frost date is like a moving target these days. So you just kind of do the best you can. So we tend to like to get them in the ground about 6 weeks before that.
So Sweet William is typically winter hardy to USDA Zone 5. Dave, is there anywhere that's too warm to plant these biennial varieties because they actually need to go through a cold period in order to bloom the following spring?
They should work fine even in a zone 8 because you're still getting cold nights in a zone 8. And the winter might not be as long. You might only get 6 weeks of winter, but you're still getting colder temperatures at night. So they should be fine in zone 8. Zone 9, probably not going to work. You'd want to go with the first year flowering type.
All right, so let's go into these varieties. So Dave, what is so special about Electron, which again is a biennial variety of Sweet William?
Well, I like to say that these are different than the annual type or the first year flowering because they put up a lot of stems per plant. I can remember getting 10 or 12 good thick stems with nice flower heads per plant when you grow the true biennial type, whereas the first year flowering don't get that many stems. They're great flowers, but not as many stems. And these are all really consistent. If you have a bed of these, they're all going to be 28 inches tall or 24 inches tall, all the same height, nice and big. Another nice thing about these is you can pick them before they bloom and use them as a green filler. So I always like to say grow way more than you think you need, and you wish you had more once they do bloom.
And there are lots of really bright, vivid bicolors in this mix, by the way. How's the fragrance on Electron?
They smell like Sweet William. Sometimes a little clove scent or a little flower scent, but they all smell great. Smell like a carnation, but they do have the scent. And the thing with the Electron, they're a single flower. So it's just a single row of petals per little floret on each flower head.
Lisa, why do you like Electron?
I mean, the colors are just dynamite. And as Dave said, it is pretty prolific. It's undoubtedly the best producer, which I think is why so many flower farmers grow this one once they get it figured out. You
Right.
only have to get burnt 1 year of not getting them in the ground to get that cold period. And the plants look great. You're going through winter, you're getting all excited, and then no stems the next year because you didn't get them in on time. So
Right.
I absolutely love Electron. And it's kind of a bright color for spring, which sometimes all those pastels get a little boring. And these just really pop up the color. So we really, really love it.
I want to point out real quick that if you are running late on getting these planted, you might be closer to your frost date. You can put them in a high tunnel or put them in a low tunnel to give them a little more protection and get them established in the fall, and then they'll also work. And if they're in a high tunnel, they're going to bloom a few weeks earlier than out in the field. So you can plant both in a high tunnel and in the field and get a longer harvest window.
Perfect. All right, now we're going to move on to Super Duplex Mix, which also sometimes goes by the alias Tall Double.
Right.
What's so great about Super Duplex Mix, Dave?
It's just like the Electron, really nice and, like the name says, tall. It has double flowers though, so the flowers are more full. It's also very prolific, putting up 10 or 12 flower stems per plant when you overwinter them. It's just great plant overall. Slightly different color range. You can see there's some more lavenders in there, not as many reds, but it's just another great spring flower. If you're making bouquets, selling straight bunches to grocery stores, it's a great flower to have.
And this mix has solid colors as well as bicolors.
Correct. Yes.
Lisa, what do you like about Super Duplex?
I mean, it's the pinks. I mean, spring is, as my florist said, just bring me every pink flower that you have, right? And so this mix, as Dave pointed out, even has lavender in it. And there's a couple of bicolors that pop in there, but it's just a whole different palette of colors. And they're super easy to use in bouquets. And we just sold tons of both of these, or actually all the Sweet Williams, to florists. I mean, they're so much better than what they ship in a box.
I remember delivering Sweet William to a florist, and they literally had ones that were in, if you ever seen like broccoli in that really thin wooden crate, still with dirt on the leaves, no leaves stripped. And the florist would tell me, oh, I only paid, I forget what, much less than I was charging them. I'm like, well, look what you have to do with those. They're smashed, literally squished in a wooden box, dirty, with all the leaves still on them. So mine were much better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Sweet William is definitely one of those crops. I mean, I could probably say this about every crop that we ever grew, but I mean, it just smokes what gets shipped in.
Yes.
Lisa, do you detect a lot of fragrance on this variety compared to some of the others?
I think that they do have that light clovey scent, like Dave said. I know that Sweet and Amazon, let me smell. Amazon has a trace, but I think these two are probably the most fragrant of the group.
Yes. I agree with you that the true biennials do have more of a scent than the newer hybrid varieties.
That's what I was going to say as well. Okay, so those were both biennials, Electron and Super Duplex. Now we're going to move on to some first-year flowering varieties. So what does that mean, Dave? What's a first-year flowering Sweet William?
That means they don't have to have the cold vernalization period like the true biennials do. So these can be planted in the fall if you want to, which works great, or they can be planted in the spring when it's still cool out, getting the plants out in March or April. And the Amazon, think of that as the hot Amazon rainforest. They can take the summer heat. So you can still plant those, succession plant into May, June, and even again in September or August and September for fall harvest.
So let's go ahead and talk about Amazon first. So Amazon has 4 different colors available. There's neon cherry, neon purple, rose magic, and lavender magic, which those 2 are my absolute favorites. What's so great about Amazon, Dave, in addition to what you just said, that they do perform really well in the summer? Lisa and I both have a bunch of Sweet William Amazon blooming right now out in the garden.
The great thing about them is that you can succession plant them and have them repeatedly throughout the summer. Whereas with the other true biennials, they're going to bloom all in a 4-week period or 3-week period and they're done. These you can succession plant every 3 weeks and have flowers all summer, which is great if you're a grower that sells either mixed bunches or bouquets to grocery stores or at the farmer's market, because everybody knows that a Dianthus Sweet William is one of the best bouquet fillers to make it look nice and big and full without having a lot of stems in it.
Lisa, what do you love about Amazon?
I mean, Amazon was always a top florist crop. And like Dave said, I mean, using them in bouquets, I mean, if Suzanne could have a good stick of Amazon for every bouquet she ever made, she'd be pretty happy about that. And I also love the fact that this is more heat tolerant. I mean, here we are. I'm holding up for those of you that are listening on a podcast. You ought to head over to YouTube and watch this beautiful slideshow that Layne has. But I just cut this like literally minutes before running in here. This is rose magic, I think, and this is rose lavender, and then this is purple. The fact that this is still blooming in the South with great stem length. Look at the length of these stems. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I love Amazon.
It's mid-August. It's been 100 degrees lately.
Yeah. And so we really succession planted hard. We fall planted, I very early spring planted, and then we succession planted about every 4 to 6 weeks after that very early spring planting, which for us is in mid-February. Sweet William is just, I mean, just such a hardy grower. If people are struggling with trying a cool flower, this is definitely one to start with. You know, I mean, they'll take bullets for you if you just give them what they want.
They will. And a lot of the other cool flowers, they just don't get the stem length when you try to plant them to bloom in the warmer months, but this really does.
Yes.
And this does not have too much fragrance, right, Lisa?
Yeah, it really doesn't. And I'll say that the purple is really a favorite because, again, everything, all the other colors in that season are really kind of pastel-y. You know, you get, when you're making a lot of bouquets, you're always looking for pop in color. And the purple Amazon can really do that also.
Dave, do you have a top color pick from the Amazon series?
Oh, I like the cherry, just again, because it's a nice bright color. But you can't beat the 2, the magics, the
I know.
rose magic and the lavender magic.
Okay, now we're going to move on to the Sweet series, which has the most color selection of any of the ones we're going to talk about today.
This collection is, I think, 13 different colors now. And I saw this spring, there's 3 more colors that might be coming out in the next year or 2. So they're even adding maybe up to 15 different colors. They're really great for overwintering in the field. Plant it like a cool flower for early spring flowers. And it's also for planting late winter or early spring, either in a high tunnel or in the field. But unlike the Amazon, the Sweet does not like the hot summer. So this is one you want to have pretty much finished by the end of June. But you can, again, plant it in late August, September in a high tunnel and have them for October, November, or even a heated greenhouse all winter long. They don't need any extra lighting or anything, just a heated greenhouse so they don't freeze. And some of the colors are great reds for Christmas, the white for Christmas, white for New Year's. So you can have them even in the wintertime in a heated greenhouse or overwintered as a cool, hardy annual or a cool flower. So they're really great, nice color range. I think there's like 4 or 5 different shades of red. There's some of the rose magic type, the multicolored ones, and solid colors too.
Lisa, what do you like about the Sweet series?
So Sweet is the first Sweet William to bloom on our farm, which has really led us to only fall plant it to be able to get really good stem length. If we plant it in very early spring, there just doesn't seem to be enough time for them to really elongate before they start setting bloom. But I tell you, you have 4 of my favorites up here. The white is priceless. I mean, we're always looking for great white flowers, and it's a good one. The coral that's next to that, and then the black cherry is, you know, I don't grow a lot of the black cherry, but to have some of that to add 1 or 2 to a bouquet just pops the rest of the colors. And then my favorite one at the top, next to that, or between the two bicolored pinks is Maxine. And I mean, short of a better way to describe it is it's Pepto-Bismol color. And
Right.
that is just that's a pink that you just don't see a lot of in other flower colors, and really love it. So we love it because it's early. Sometimes if it can start out short in the garden and in the field, because of course I have no hoop houses, just give it a little week or two, and then it really just gets into its own, and it is incredibly productive. But they're a small ball type bloom.
Yeah, very different than the other sweet one. It is a
Yeah.
smaller flower head and more round, but great color collection, color options. And this one, they're still doing breeding. Like I said, possibly a few more colors coming in the next year or so.
And there's not much fragrance to this one either, right?
Right.
No, you got to stick your nose right in them to smell them.
Yeah.
And then it just smells green.
Now we're going to move on to Bodish mix or Bodish mix, however you want to pronounce that. Lisa, do you want to talk about this one and why this is a good addition to someone's Sweet William planting?
Sure. And so here on our farm, we call this the bow mix because that name is kind of a tongue twister. And we started experimenting with this one about 3 or 4 years ago because it has those bicolors like we see in Electron and a little bit in Super Duplex, but it doesn't need the cold period, meaning if you miss that window to start those biennial Sweet Williams, this is a nice fill-in. And it's got some really great bicolors in it, and they aren't, they're kind of soft like Super Duplex is. And we fall plant it and very early spring plant it. And it can be quite productive when it's happy where you've put it. And we get about 20 to 22-inch stems on it. But, again, we just always had such a demand for Sweet Williams. We just brought it into the mix and it just fills right in.
Lisa, how's the head shape on this one compared to the Amazon, which is a bit branchier, and the Sweet, which is more of a ball shape? Where does this one fall?
It kind of falls with the Sweet family. It's more of a ball type. But I will say it's probably a little flatter. It's not quite as ball as circular, but yeah, it's that same. It's not a huge head.
And there are a handful of individual colors you can get, or there's a mix, which is what is showing on the screen if you're watching over on YouTube. Any fragrance that you remember smelling?
I do not remember a fragrance. This is just a good backup. Again, if you don't get your Electron and Super Duplex to get that cold period, either you didn't plan it, or this is one that is first year flowering, and it's a nice backup to have.
Okay, well, now we're going to go on to our final one, and this is really different looking than the other Sweet Williams we've talked about, and it's called Dynasty. What is this all about, Lisa?
So I saw Frank Arnowski hold up an armload of this, or either Pamela, I'm not sure who was, and this talked about how much they loved the Sweet William. And I instantly ordered the seed a couple years ago, and I have to agree, the bloom itself has a similar look to the carnations, those heirloom carnations that we grow, but these are more blooms on one stem, kind of like a spray, and the colors are dynamic. And I just love, it's frillier, it's more casual. Sweet Williams, I sometimes feel like can be a little stiff, when you're trying to use them in mixed bouquets. This just offers a little bit more softness and texture, I think, but totally love it.
Yeah, I like the colors on those. What I would call jewel tones, the nice, vivid, really intense colors.
And they're so ruffly, which I love.
Yeah.
Do you remember any fragrance on these, Lisa?
I was just trying to think. I don't think there was any fragrance, or minute if there was.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up by asking, if someone was going to plant a row of Sweet William, how would you divide it up? Dave, do you want to say how you divide it up amongst different varieties?
Equal amounts of each one, because they all have their good points. If you're planting them in the fall, you can plant all of the ones we talked about and plant some of each because they're all a little bit different. And then if you find after your first year that you really don't like one of them, then leave that one out later in future years. But I would try them all if you haven't done them yet.
Lisa, how about you?
Yeah, and if you're just experimenting, there's nothing wrong, especially with small growers or gardeners, to try the mixes of the different types. So you can actually trial kind of all the colors, Amazon mix. I guess there's an Amazon mix.
Yeah, there's an Amazon mix and a Sweet mix.
and a sweet mix. And that way you kind of get to meet all the colors, and you could break your bed into, 4 or 5 sections and, do an electron, a super duplex, and so forth and so on. And yeah, and really see. And again, I just was talking yesterday about, I don't consider 1 year of growing a really true trial. It really takes 3 years before
Right.
you make a decision to kick it to the curb or to keep it.
Yeah.
And if the first year we grew Dynasty, I'd planted it late. It was kind of squatty. The second year, the deer literally ate it to the ground over and over again. First time I've had deer eat Dianthus. And then the third year was a charm. We got tall stems, plenty of them. And so you just have to keep trying.
If someone was going to start with just one variety, they just wanted to add one, which would you recommend?
Tough call. I prefer the tall duplex mix.
Okay.
If you only had to do one, and second choice would be the Amazon, because you can plant it either in the fall or again in the spring.
Lisa?
Yeah, I would have to go with what Dave said. I would be an Amazon, fall and very early spring. And then if you're talking fall, definitely get some electron or super duplex, eat one or the other.
Okay, and then how about if you planted all these different varieties in the fall, which one would you say blooms the earliest in your conditions and the latest, Lisa?
So sweet is definitely the first. And then I think bow comes in. And this Dynasty mix is in or more on the early side. And of course, this is all fall planted. And then electron and super duplex do tend to bloom about the same time for me. And they're like right before. Amazon's the last one to start blooming. And electron and Dynasty, and super duplex come in before the Amazon. And then of course, if you succession plant Amazon, you'll keep on having blooms.
That works well if somebody plants all 6 varieties in the fall. They're not all going to bloom, the first week of April.
Right.
They're going to have a good 6, maybe 8 weeks of blooms.
So you get a good variation of looks and colors, and then also an extension of your overall bloom time.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, well, that was it for this episode on Sweet William. If you're watching over on YouTube, let us know in the comments which varieties are your favorites or which ones you plan on planting this fall. And you can also give us that information using the form linked in the show notes. And thank you so much again to Dave for being here. We really appreciate his expertise and insight. And don't forget that Dave has an on-demand online course with the Gardener's Workshop called Bulbs, Perennials, Woodies, and More. Right, Dave?
Yep, you got it right. It's always great to spend time with you guys.
Yeah.
Another great episode from the Seed Talk with Lisa and Layne, and today with an add-in of Dave. And we appreciate y'all visiting. And remember, we always appreciate when you share us with your friends or drop us a review. And all right, folks, till we meet again. Ciao.
Bye.